is Lisa Gaucher. I'm the VP of Partner Success for SVLG. And I am pleased to introduce the second panel, Advancing Authentically, Owning, Overcoming Imposter Syndrome, and the women who will help us tackle this crucial topic. First, I'd like to invite Safiya Miller to the stage. Safiya is a Software and Digital Platforms Account Teams Director for Microsoft, but is blazing her own creative path. She's an entrepreneur with a vibrant women's wear line, an SF commissioner, and in what she considers her most important role to date, a new mom of twin warrior princesses. And they're in the room with us today. Safiya. Next, we're going to introduce Shari Mager, who is U.S. National's Capital Market Readiness Partner at KPMG, where she advises VCs, startups, and some of the world's leading technology companies. She also serves as partner champion of KPMG's Women of Deal Advisory and Strategy of their network of women, where she supports, connects, champions women in M&A field. Shari. Next, we're going to invite Hannah Gordon, who is the Chief Legal Administrative Officer for the San Francisco 49ers. Her achievement includes launching the first fan engagement community for LGBTQ+ fans and allies in professional sports to national acclaim. And in 2021, she designed the all-gender retail line that was first of its kind in the NFL, resulting in the 49ers 2021 Pride campaign being shortlisted as a best practice for the Best Leader Sports Award. Next, we're going to invite Malia Cohen, who is the chair of the California State Board of Equalization. She represents 23 counties and 9.5 million Californians, and she previously served as president of the San Francisco Board of Supervisors. But most importantly, she's my emerged sister. Welcome. Moderating our panel is Kristen Brown, Director of Local and Regional Government Relations at SVLG, and lead of our Women's Leadership Series. Let's all welcome the panel to the stage.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here for this exciting conversation about advancing authentically, owning and overcoming imposter syndrome. We have a stellar panel here today, and I can't wait to hear what you all have to say on this topic, so let's go ahead and get started. Shari, I'd like to start with you. According to a recent KPMG study, 75% of executive women say they have experienced imposter syndrome at one point or another in their careers. 81% of executive women believe they put more pressure on themselves not to fail than men do. And these are some really large numbers. Shari, it's important for women at every level to know that if they are feeling these things, that they're common feelings, and that they're not alone. Are there things that companies and organizations can and should do to help foster a sense of belonging and lessen this experience of imposter syndrome?
Yeah, absolutely, and thanks for the question. I mean, certainly I think those numbers are so impactful when you think about how many women have experienced imposter syndrome in their careers, right? And I think the tone should be around communication and collaboration. So as we're thinking about what we can do in our organizations to sort of foster community and collaboration, I think communication is one of the most important things. So if we all know that 75% of us have felt this way before, then we're not alone, right? And we're not feeling so isolated. And I think just that, making that collaborative environment is going to be so important. And so as part of the study, there were two key things that were brought up around what we can do to create a more inclusive environment and help reduce these feelings of imposter syndrome. And so the first one is being a supportive performance manager or boss. So we all can think about people who have lifted us up and supported us and been so impactful in our journeys, regardless of whether we're just starting out or whether we've been in our careers for many years. And so I think, you know, we should also be thinking about how can we give back and how can we be that supportive leader. So pull from the people who've done it well for you, and maybe even think of some lessons of people that maybe didn't do it as well for you. I've certainly had both in my career. I've had leaders who, you know, I didn't feel were terribly supportive, but I've had others who I didn't really expect them to be, you know, reaching out and pulling me up, and they did so without me even asking or realizing that they cared. And so that's, I think, very important. So the more that we can do that and give back, I think it's really important. And then the second thing that people have said is important to reducing feelings of imposter syndrome is really feeling valued and feeling rewarded. And so we all can play a very important role in that. And I think, you know, a message that I try to remind myself is don't wait for the big milestones to thank your team and to reward your team. Instill that message and that feedback along the way and celebrate the small steps along the way and reinforce how important they are to the overall process, to your team, to the journey, and how we can just be, you know, so, I guess, recognizing everything that they do. So those would be, I mean, we could probably talk about this topic for the whole panel, but I know we have such amazing women up here that all have so many great things to say. But I would say keep in mind those two key things, which at least were what resonated in the women who were surveyed.
That's fantastic, thank you. And you're absolutely right. Just hearing from other women, you belong here, can really help lessen that feeling of imposter syndrome. Safiya, I'd like to go next to you. You're not only one of the youngest account team directors at Microsoft and a fashion designer, a San Francisco commissioner on the Office of Economic and Workforce Development, and a mother of twins. Not all, that's not enough. But you've also found time to start a scholarship with your brother Darren, a Googler, that honors young people that dare to dream big and pursue America's best post-secondary opportunities. Women tend to wear many hats, as it is. Trying to find time for our families, for our passions, and for our businesses, it can be really exhausting. Is there such a thing as work-life balance, or are we really looking at work-life integration? And then also, in your role at Microsoft, have you ever had doubts about your belonging there? And if so, how did you overcome or work through these kinds of feelings? And what advice do you have for other women who are having the same feelings? So I know that was a lot in one question, but let's start with, you know, this thought on work-life balance or work-life integration.
Yeah, so definitely between work-life balance and work-life integration, I'm glad we are talking about integration. You know, balance is a misnomer. I am fortunate to be able to share my responsibilities with a strong village and community. So today, for example, I have my au pair Seve's in the background. I have my twin girls with me. And I said, you know what? I want them to get an opportunity to come outside, get some fresh air. And this is also great for her to learn from incredible women in the Valley. So one key thing that has helped me for work-life integration is being really clear about your non-negotiables. For me, that's family, that's fitness, that's my faith. And making sure that how can I figure out how to incorporate those things. Has anybody read the book Atomic Habits? Okay, so I highly recommend that book. It's been a game changer for my family. And one of the key things that we've implemented is a technique called habit stacking. So essentially, every morning I know I'm gonna wake up, I'm gonna feed the girls, I'm gonna change them, and I want to stack another healthy habit on top of that, and that is working out. So I know, like, even if it's 5 minutes, we're gonna take that trigger and make some time for our health and our fitness. And I know that for me to show up and be my best self, that is an important piece. So one tip I would say for work-life integration is figuring out what are some habits that you know you always have to do, and how can you add something small on top of it? And small, tiny steps can make a big impact. So that's what stands out for me for work-life integration. And again, just being clear and figuring out how to make it work for you. I think as I've progressed in my career, I've recognized that, as I said earlier, you can have it all, but not necessarily at the same time. And and recognizing that that's okay. There's gonna be ebbs and flows in your career, and Sometimes personal is going to overcome professional, and sometimes professional will overcome personal. But how do you have that open communication that you talked about with those people that are important in your life to make sure that you're being cognizant of what they bring to the table, thanking them along the way, and appreciating them so that you can show up and be your best self?
It's fantastic. And then also in your role at Microsoft, have you had this feeling of doubt, of imposter syndrome? How did you overcome that? And what advice would you give to others? Or if not, how did you do that? Because I would like to know that advice also.
Yeah. So happy to share that. So I was reading about Amy Cuddy, just refreshing myself on this whole imposter syndrome idea. And I like how she started rephrasing it as imposter experience. Like it's, it's not a syndrome as if it's a mental health sickness that we have. Sometimes you experience it, and it's not just for women. A lot of men experience the same thing. And one thing for me, yes, I definitely experienced a little bit of that at Microsoft. And you know the secret? Most people, the role that they're in, this is the first time they're doing it. The very first time. So think about the CEOs you work with, the VPs you work with. They are doing these roles for the first time, and that trigger helped me recognize, you know what? I may not have it all figured out along the way, but if I put in the effort and the energy and show up and try my best, then I feel good about what I'm putting forward. And I think what happens often is that we self-select ourselves out of opportunities. We self-select ourselves out of opportunities of growth that maybe we don't fit all of the requirements that are written down. But if you have the drive and the energy and the effort, then you can fill whatever those gaps are that are in your head. So one thing that I've seen recently is that it's not that necessarily people lack motivation. Sometimes you lack specificity. So if you're specific about what you need to reach whatever next goal, whatever those gaps are, and specific and recognizing that for yourself, and maybe, hey, I see that you're stellar at public speaking, and that's something that I want to improve in. And I want to spend 5 minutes with you to think through how do you prepare for your presentations. And being that specific will help you make those tiny steps on becoming, whatever that goal is for you in your career.
It's fantastic. Thank you so much. Chair Cohen, I'd like to go to you now.
Okay.
As we talk about women performing so many roles in their daily lives, let's take a look at your day. You are chair of the California State Board of Equalization that administers our $85 billion property tax system that funds schools and local governments. You are a member of the Franchise Tax Board. You recently served as president of the San Francisco Police Commission, and before that, you served as president of the City and County of San Francisco Board of Supervisors. And now you are running for California State Controller, the chief financial officer of the world's 5th largest economy. How do you bring energy to all of these tasks? And what lessons can we learn from you? I'm sure there's so many lessons we can learn to you. How do you bring so much energy to all of this? What do you have to share with us, to teach us?
Thank you. But hearing you list all that got me tired.
You got me tired.
So first I want to anchor the conversation, I just want to read the definition of imposter syndrome for everyone so that we're on the same page. The persistent inability to believe that one's success is deserved or has been legitimately achieved as a result of one's own effort or skill. People suffering from imposter syndrome may be at increased risk of anxiety. So I just wanted to also just kind of talk a little bit around that. It's loosely defined as doubting your abilities and feeling like a fraud. Well, I don't ever feel that way. What I tell people is I come to this space of public service really with a desire to serve, right? When I was in the 3rd grade, we were on a tour of San Francisco City Hall. And when I got into high school, I did an informational interview with this man that was actually a member on the Board of Supervisors. And so I was like 15 or 16 years old, and I literally walked away from that interview thinking, if this guy can do it, I can do it. Because I really thought, there's nothing special about him. I mean, there was a lot of hype, and there was a lot of pomp and circumstance. They were like, oh, you're going to be meeting with so-and-so, supervisor, blah, blah, blah. And I walked away like, I could do this. I can do this. And I really think that has really helped me propel to be in the space. Most of what you listed on that accomplishment list happened before Madison was born. So Madison's only 2 years old, so this is running for office with a 2-year-old is something different. That's another panel, though. But in terms of imposter syndrome, the way I truly try to coach women to go around it or to get through it is just to remember that if they can do it, you can do it, that there's nothing special about this person. Much like what Safiya was saying, that this is a person that's in a role that is new to them as well. And they put their pants on just like you one day, one foot at a time. Now, I will admit, oftentimes I will overcompensate by really doing my homework, making sure that I'm the most knowledgeable. I read all of my information packets. I think about questions that they will ask me, questions that would make me feel nervous. I do a lot of role playing when I'm getting ready to give a speech and present in a public forum. So there maybe is some over preparation, but that was more earlier in my 20s. Now in my 40s, I am like owning it and happy to be and sharing the stage with women and celebrating them. So panels like this is really important to all of our growth. We as leaders, you as leaders on your individual teams, but also as women as we all continue to grow and mature, because ultimately my goal is to chip down the patriarchy. Those systems that are in place to keep women down, keep us in our place, all of that. We are all in professions that are traditionally male-dominated. I'm in a profession where there's taxes, finances, and fees. Donald Trump's first piece of legislation was a tax break for his wealthy friends. Now, I don't want to step on toes and go partisan on everyone, but the reality is that there are very few African Americans that are in the space of finance, let alone women that are in the space of finance, let alone Latinas. Like, there is just an opportunity here for us to grow and to collectively bring people along and bring us all to the table. And to our allies, the men that love us, you also have a responsibility to bring us along and bring us to the table and bring us into spaces and to be a champion and an ally and know when to fall back. I think that's also a really critical piece. Know when to fall back and to elevate your sister forward. And I believe that begins to change the culture, change that feeling of imposter syndrome, change the fact that we're special or that we're one of a handful. And most importantly is to normalize female leadership.
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh my God.
And Chair Cohen, you mentioned your 2-year-old, Madison.
Oh, yes.
So as a mother, what message do you have for other mothers in the workplace who are rising professionals?
You know, I think that we were been dealt a blessing with this hybrid workplace, this work environment. I, too, much like you heard from Buffy Wicks, Assemblywoman Wicks earlier, and how she has had her child and she puts her family first. I do the same thing. Much like Safiya, I bring Madison with me into spaces that I can teach her and learn and show her so that she can see not only she hears me on the Zoom all the time, but see other women and other men that are in leadership roles, and so that she begins to fashion like what it is that she wants to do. Now she's 2, so I mean we're really working on potty train, to be fair, but I do have high hopes for her, and we'll continue to cultivate that that ambition, not stifle it, not encourage her to play small, to be creative, and so these are things that are in the back of my mind that I'm thinking about when I'm looking at my calendar and my schedule. Today's a crazy one. So just getting up, getting her ready, getting her set up for the rest of the day. And I think also relying on the community. You're my mother, my aunt, nanny help. It is okay. And bringing them into the space and widening. I mean, my mother knew I was elected, but never really knew like the full scope of like what it is that we're doing. So then when she started to come into the house and try to help me manage with Madison, I'm giving speeches on Zoom, like it taught her. And so that is, I guess, my mantra is always to be teaching as I'm doing, and I'll rest there.
Thank you so much. Hannah, let's go to you.
Okay. Also, I want a lawn sign. I'm voting on our ballots because Chairwoman Cohen deserves our vote.
Thank you, Hannah.
And our donation.
Hannah, in an interview that you did last fall for NFL.com, Kevin Warren, then with the Vikings, had asked you what you wanted to do. And you commented that you sometimes undershot your desires because you didn't want to be perceived as too ambitious. And I think a lot of women can relate to this. I know I can. And we often feel that we don't think our true vision or wants will be taken seriously, so we kind of downplay them a little bit. And when you gave your answer, when you told him that answer, he told you to aim higher. So what kind of effect did this have on you, being encouraged to think bigger and to vocalize it? What advice would you give to the women in this audience about being authentic to yourself and speaking your truths?
Sure. So I think when what I had told him at the time, I was not yet in the position that I'm in today as a chief legal officer. And I said that's what I had wanted to be, instead of actually saying I wanted to be the president of a team, which is what I really had wanted to be. And he was like, but no. Like, you're already going to be the chief legal officer at some point. Like, you need to aim higher. Like, you can do more. And for me, it was so encouraging to know that someone else believed in me, someone who was in that seat already. And it gave me more confidence to say it, because when you're affirmed by others, you feel more comfortable. And I think what I also had to get comfortable with was that not everyone was going to be like Kevin. There were going to be people that when I said I want to be a president said, ooh, who does she think she is? And I had to be okay with that. And so I think a lot of what we have to do when we talk about imposter syndrome and being authentic to ourselves is to accept that we will not always be liked. Because as women, we are often socialized to be people pleasers. And in terms of being authentic and speaking our truths, I really think we have to know ourselves first. So I wrote a 8-week guided journal, mostly because I had so many people in situations like this who were like, well, how do I get where you are? How do I do this? And I wanted to give people something practical. You're gonna be like, is she talking about her book? Yes, girl, I am. Yeah, so I'm like, is she self-promoting? Yes, because guess who's not gonna promote you unless you are promoting what you are trying to tell people. And it really came from a genuine place of, I want you to have the lessons that I learned. And the first lesson was film study. Like, as somebody in football and sports, what you see is that every scout, every coach, every athlete, they are watching what they did and getting to know themselves, their own habits, their own weaknesses, their own strengths. And so we talk so much about being authentic, and I don't think we spend enough time on, like, who am I? Because I can't be authentic if I don't know myself. So it really starts with yourself, leading yourself, knowing yourself, and from there you can have the vision, and then you can speak it out loud. Then you can speak your truths to other people. So that's my experience with it.
Absolutely, wonderful. And you know, another question, and I'll start with you. So sports, but then also tech and politics and business. There's progress, but these are all still very male-dominated fields, as all of you have touched on, right? So I'd like to just hear from each of you briefly, what would your #1 piece of advice be for women that are entering the field that you are in now?
Yes. May I?
Yes, please.
And this is going to stem off of what Hannah was saying. I heard this very early on in my career. Ambition is not a dirty word. And never play small. You don't have to compensate to make his ego comfortable. A lot of women are nodding because you know what I'm talking about. And the men are like, yeah, they can conceptualize it, they understand it, they can intellectualize it, but I mean, I want you to own it and to embrace it. Ambition is not a dirty word, and it's okay to be ambitious. It's okay to be the president. It's okay to run for president of the United States. It's okay to be the governor of the state of California.
Yes.
We got it. We got it. I love it.
I guess if we're going on the line, my advice for sports or any male-dominated field, competence and confidence. So you have to know your stuff first, like learn your craft, really be expert at your craft, and then be confident that you are competent at it. Because if you are missing any one of those two things, like if you come in confident but you really don't know what you're doing, like people will figure that out eventually. But if you know what you're doing and you come in like you don't, people are going to assume you don't. Like, you really do need to come in there and own it. Like, you need to come in and whatever you have, if you have to get in the power pose, like Amy Cuddy teaches you, like, do what you have to do to come in there like you know what you're doing, because you do.
Absolutely. I think what I would say is it's important to get out of your comfort zone. So if you're feeling comfortable, it's time to change that. And I feel like it's a muscle that you develop. And I made sort of the first big change when I was 15 years old, and I chose to go and do a rotation with another family in another province. I'm from Canada originally, and lived, in a different province with a different language and a new family. That was like out of my comfort zone, but the more I've done those types of things along the way, the easier they become. So challenge yourselves. I like the saying, get comfortable being uncomfortable. And I think the more you challenge yourself, the more you step into those places that don't feel so comfortable, that's where you grow, that's where you develop, and the sky's the limit. So just get uncomfortable, ladies.
And then from a tech perspective or any male-dominated field, I would say two things. One, I encourage people to do more of what sets your soul on fire. What does that mean? Everybody has a superpower and gift. And if you're not tapping into that and letting people know, hey, when Malia comes, she's gonna drop the mic on stage. And she's gonna put herself in opportunities to do that, right? So think about that. What is that superpower for you? And are you able to demonstrate that in your interview? Are you able to demonstrate that in how you say, hey, in the first 90 days, I'm gonna accomplish X, because I already know that's something that's in my wheelhouse. And then the second thing is, especially I would say for tech interviews, and sometimes it feels like they're trying to psych you out or like catch you with, the wrong, this question's gonna you're not gonna be able to answer it. It's more about the how. It's about your behavior. It's about how you think that people are truly interested in understanding. So I would say in like kind of the butterflies you might feel in your stomach, that's not a bad thing. That shows that you actually care, you're excited, you're energized about the opportunity. So to sit with that, it will go away, and recognize that it's more about how you think that people are really interested in as you're trying to enter new career opportunities.
This is great advice from all of you. I know I'm learning a lot. I just want to take a moment to remind everyone, if you have questions for our panel, there's a number here that you can text your questions to. I'll take a quick pause to see if we have any questions that have come in already. And they are headed to the stage. Thank you. All right. So the first question is about imposter syndrome. And the question is, how do women undercut themselves publicly, and how can we remedy this? So this goes back, I think earlier we were talking about kind of watering down our ambitions or undercutting how well we do things or how good we are at things. And so how have you seen that in yourselves and other women? How do you think we can remedy this? I'll open the floor. Please do.
Sometimes women are a little shy, right? They're like this, or they'll talk with their hand over their mouth. They think that what they have to say is not important. And how do you remedy this? Say it. You got something to say it. Yep. Most people in the room will have that same question. Yep. And be confident. Sometimes you can always do your homework before and come with a pre-thought of question that sometimes, well, in my industry, you get the notes, you get the agenda, you'll have slides, things sent to you before. So in preparation, I'm always thinking, what are the questions? I'm in finance, so I'm like, how much is this going to cost? What's the rate of return on the investment? Is this going to raise taxes? So that's what I'm always in the mindset that I'm always thinking of.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think one of the things I've seen during the pandemic, certainly in the working world and being on video and on screen, is one of the things I've seen women do is be off camera and be more silent. And some of it had to do with, I'm not quite sort of ready to be on camera yet. And so I was like, that shouldn't matter. So, I'd be on camera with my teams. I didn't have makeup on. Maybe my hair was in a ponytail. Maybe I had just finished my workout. Just to show them that it's okay and you're not going to be judged. But I think, we stand in sort of the background if we're not visible and if we're not present. And so I think in this world where it's very odd to be on camera all day long, and I'm glad we're getting to more of a hybrid environment again, but I encourage my colleagues and my employees, be on camera. You don't always have to be on camera, but we want to see you, we want to hear you, we want to, get your contribution. So be that person who's present and in the moment.
Yeah, and a lot of apologizing.
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry that my kids are in the background. I'm sorry I'm not ready. I'm sorry. I'm sorry all the time. And I kind of tested myself at one point to try to say excuse me or pardon me or like find something else so that like I wasn't constantly saying sorry because it becomes a verbal crutch and we start doing it without even noticing that it's in our language. And I think there's so many things like both of you are saying like sitting like this, or like having your hair in your face, or raising your voice at the end of every sentence as if it was a question, or sort of seeking that like, oh, I don't know, what do you think? Like, oh, I don't know if this is a good idea, but so having more confidence in what we're saying.
Yeah, and I love that. What stood out, Hannah, for your point is, even in my LinkedIn now, like my first thing for Safiya, it's twin mom. And I wear that as a badge of honor. So there's no need to say, you hear the kids in the background. Yeah, you hear them, because I just had them, and I'm here, I'm showing up, and I'm still delivering and running circles around most of you. So wear it as a badge of honor, own it. It is an additional attribute to be a mother, to be an aunt, to be a cousin, to be a best friend. And I think more women, we have to show up and say, like, this is a value add. This is not a detractor. And then the other thing I would say is mansplaining is real. And what happens as you're talking, one trick I learned from one of my leaders is, hey, be the first person to speak. That way, that question, that you're like, I had the same question. Okay, well, if you asked it at the beginning, then you'd get the credit for it. So how to avoid some mansplaining from happening? Be the first person to speak up, and definitely take recognition, because sometimes it happens and your thought, your ambitious and beautiful idea, someone thinks Harry said it. And you're like, what the? No. Oh, Harry, I'm glad you emphasized my point. Back to what I was saying. Yes, that's a great way to implement this idea, and take back ownership and do not feel any qualms about it.
Speaking of taking back ownership and being unapologetic, also, it's okay to show emotion. It's okay to emote. It's okay. I listen to a lot of public comment and hear testimony on very serious issues that have had an effect on people's lives. And people will come all the time in the public space and say, I'm so sorry. Mostly sorry. No man has ever said I'm sorry. But a woman say, I'm so sorry, I'm crying. And I say, stop saying sorry. Yeah. It's okay to feel what you're feeling, because that is part of your testimony. That is part of who you are. That is why we're having this venue for you to come in and to share.
That's so important. Everything that you've all just said is so important, and feeling the emotions, I have had that experience in my life. I know other women have as well, of not wanting to appear too emotional in meetings or in experiences with our colleagues, or even just in our life with our friends and our family. The thoughts about not apologizing is another thing. I remember at one point in my career feeling that I was being interrupted a lot, and I was speaking with a colleague about it, and I was telling her, I think I just need to say, I'm sorry, I was still speaking. And she goes, no, don't start with I'm sorry, just say I was still speaking. And that's
Kamala taught us that lesson, right?
That's right. Now.
That's right. So that's something I'm still working on. But I think it's so important, everything that you've all just shared. Our next question is for you, Safiya, and it was about your habit tracking. And someone wants to know if you keep a bullet journal.
That's a great question. So yeah, as a techie too, I definitely like to use a lot of tools. So I definitely use notes a lot and put down one thing that my husband and I do, say like, what are your top 3 things you want to accomplish? And like now I have verbalized it. We have accountability. I could put it in my notes and I can go back to it. So habit tracking verbally and also writing it down is nice. You can also go back to it. And then another thing we do is we set goals for the year, and we use the reminders tool on Apple. And we break it down by topics. We put our little tracker things in there, and we don't always do it, but we try to go back monthly and like check on the progress. See how we're going against things. Where do we need to repivot and reapproach something differently? So for me, it's been really helpful. That Atomic Habits book is a game changer. Definitely a game changer.
I'm gonna have to write that down. I'm gonna read that book now.
Yeah.
You asked at the beginning if anyone had read it, and I thought, well, I know someone who's going to now, and that is me. So here's another one that I think is a really important question that we haven't really touched on. There are different kind of leadership styles and different ways of being authentic and expressing your authenticity. And this question from the audience is, what if your authentic leadership style isn't to be in the spotlight? How do you assert your competence and your confidence when attention isn't really what suits you?
You're asking for alpha females.
Yeah.
Well, you know what?
No, but I mean, I've seen other people do it, so I'm gonna say what other people do. I do think that competence is, and I don't know exactly what the job is of the person, et cetera, which it would be helpful if we could be like super fact specific. I'm such a lawyer. I'm like, but what are all the facts? But I do think that leadership isn't just about being in the spotlight, right? It's about, who am I leading and what am I leading them towards? Like, you can be an effective leader and people will see that if you have made clear, this is the goal that I'm trying to achieve, this is who my team is, I have motivated my team to get to that goal, and I've delivered. It doesn't mean you have to like always pound the table, but you do need to, depending on who the audience is that you are trying to demonstrate this leadership to, like, your team knows if you're a leader or not, and that has nothing to do with like how you publicly speak. That's how you speak to them. That's how you speak in meetings. Like, do you have the respect of your people? That you may be spending tons of one-on-one time with them. And then if it's that you want to see if your like boss is seeing your leadership, like, I would have that conversation with him or her. Like, what is it that you need to see from me? Like, what are the goals that we're trying to achieve as a company, as an organization, a department, whatever it is, and then demonstrating how you're delivering. So yeah, I don't think that leadership, again, like, we may all be alphas, but like, there are plenty of people with different personalities who are in leadership roles.
Yeah, I'll just say on Hannah's point, when you if you want to become a people manager, one of the most important things is highlighting the people that work for you.
Amen.
So we're alpha females, but it doesn't mean that you actually have to be the one on stage. Like, true awesome leaders, if I think about them, they have their rock stars owning the material and they're cheering them on. They're putting them in the right rooms. They're activating the people that work for them to do well and to show up well. So I would just say, like, again, what we talked about earlier, understanding what truly sets you apart. Like, are you being able to show that to your leadership, being specific with the feedbacks? Oftentimes we're scared to ask these questions because we don't want the bad answer. But what's worse is not knowing. So it's better to ask and be direct about, hey, am I meeting these metrics, these KPIs? And I'll just go the tech focus. If you're at Amazon, for instance, like, they love a one-pager. That's a written document. Right? You don't have to speak towards that. So every industry, every job has a different culture and how they assess people, how they look for leadership, and how they promote. So recognize what those are and play in a place that you're going to do well, knowing your own strengths and weaknesses.
Right? Yeah, that's great. You know, and this also kind of makes me think about something that I'm interested to get your feedback on as well, all of you, is that kind of concept of fake it until you make it. And I'll say that because I admit, I am actually an introverted person, but I found that the things that I was drawn to and the passions that I had in community and government and politics required me to kind of be a little bit more extroverted, and so I kind of had to fake it until I made it, right? But to the point that you had said earlier, Safiya, I believe it was you that said just get comfortable with being uncomfortable. Yep. And so bringing this kind of, tying this all together, right? The authenticity, the imposter syndrome or imposter experience, getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. It seems like there's a lot of vulnerability that is kind of required in being a leader and having leadership as a woman in power, I suppose you would say. And so we just have a couple minutes left, but thinking about our experiences and our discussions that we've had today about imposter syndrome specifically, there's another question from the audience about, do you feel that men experience imposter syndrome to the same level as women and just don't speak about it or don't discuss it? Or do you think that it's an entirely different experience?
Well,
that's a
good one. We're all
kind of
thinking about
thinking
it.
about that. Yeah, no, these moments of pause aren't bad. They're just, we're thinking.
I guess I would say I think men do experience imposter syndrome. I don't think they experience it to the same extent that maybe women do, or they experience it differently. But I think it's something we all live with. And we had something interesting happen. We do a sort of leadership training courses for all of our employees, and we had a session where we invited everyone to come to a session we did on imposter syndrome. And the event was oversold, and there were just as many men as women who signed up for it. So to me, that was very telling. It actually was an event that was targeted to our women in deal advisory and strategy, but we had just as many men show up as well. So I think that to me said that we're all dealing with this in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah. I would agree, but I think that it might manifest in a different way to what you were saying. That I think, and it's not all men are equal, right? I think if you're a man of color, maybe your first generation to going to college, maybe your parents were immigrants in your first generation here in the U.S., that there may be some uncertainty there. And I think, say, if you grew up at a country club and your father is a judge, then you may have a privilege that allows you to insulate yourself and not feel or not acknowledge that imposter syndrome, and then overcompensate with being brash, being bold, sometimes in terms of, sometimes it can be considered as arrogant, overconfident.
Yeah. I mean, there's certainly plenty of people who are insecure, and I don't know if that's the same thing necessarily as imposter experience, but that will often manifest in really bad leadership. It will manifest in wanting to have a fear-based culture, wanting to make sure that your number twos can never supplant you. That so I definitely have seen insecurity in people who are in those roles, who are men, and so I think, yeah, it can happen, but probably, like Malia said, it manifests in different ways for different people.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I would just say it's across the valley, not gender specific. How we've traversed through risk-averse companies, heavy risk-centric, and that alone is going to have some kind of imposter feeling in how you show up and how you thrive in the valley. So for me, I don't think it's gender specific. Maybe how you address it and approach it, that might depend differently on your gender. But again, I think a lot of us feel it, and it's not anything to do with you being, with your gender.
Yeah. Well, ladies, we are at the end of our time. I am so honored to have learned so much from all of you today. I know that all of us in this room likely feel the same. Thank you so much for everything that you've shared with us. It's been a wonderful conversation. If we could give a round of applause.